So one breakdown that has kept coming up that people have asked us to do, we do these hypothetical fights. What would happen if this person fought that person? And a lot of people want to know what would happen if, and probably when, Khamzat Chimaev fights Bo Nickal. Now, we've seen some chatter between the two. Bo Nickal has said that Khamzat's not even in the same stratosphere with him as far as wrestling accolades are concerned. And as far as medals, if you want to count the scoreboard and the stats, he's probably right about that.
Right.
However, Khamzat is a force to be reckoned with inside of the cage. And one thing we know about wrestling inside the cage, it's different than putting on a singlet and competing under traditional wrestling, whether it be Greco-Roman or freestyle rules. So it's two different things. But I would be really interested to see this matchup because I think both men really want to prove that they can take down the other one.
For sure.
I think it would be a wild fight, certainly a wild first round. And I want to hear your thoughts on, technically what each guy would need to do and what they need to bring to the table in order to get their hand raised.
Yeah, well, I love this fight, and I'm just like everybody else on the internet. I would love to see this fight happen. I'm glad that we're doing a hypothetical video, but if I had to put my money on it, this fight is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 calendar years, and I'm extending with that.
Could be sooner.
Yeah, I think it could be sooner, but you have to look at the trajectory of both of their careers. We just saw Bo Nickal at 300. He looked great. He's pretty much been flawless in all of his UFC outings so far. And while he says he's not impressed with his performance or not happy with what he's doing in there every time, he still, understands that while I'm young and I don't have that much experience, not only in the cage but in the UFC, I need a few more fights to really get my beak wet, really get my feet under me and understand how to become a world champion. Khamzat Chimaev's mindset's different. Khamzat Chimaev was saying from the very first time we saw him on Fight Island in Abu Dhabi that I'm coming for the belt. And then like 9 days later, he does it in a different weight class and says, I'm coming for that belt too. And then we got the Khamzat Chimaev experiment, which was really something amazing. And I think that Khamzat Chimaev isn't in the same mindset that Bo Nickal's in. I think Khamzat Chimaev, if you threw him in a title fight right now, he wouldn't bat an eye. I think that's actually what he's clamoring for.
Yes.
And beating Robert Whittaker will certainly put him in the right place for that. And Bo Nickal, right after 300, said, I'd like about 5 or 6 more fights before I start considering a title shot. And that tells you a little bit about the confidence of the two guys. Now, obviously, Bo Nickal, it won't be outworked. A guy with the wrestling pedigree he has is not coming into a fight unprepared and not going to face anybody that works any harder than him. He might find somebody that works equally as hard, but you're not really going to find somebody that's going to outdo him. And I really do think that your point about the wild first round is accurate. I would love to see that fight happen mostly for the first round because Bo Nickal has made no bones about it. He says, I'm going to walk across the cage, pick Khamzat up, and throw him around like a rag doll. But Khamzat Chimaev saying the exact same thing. And if history is any indication of what the future's bringing, Khamzat Chimaev is going to walk across that cage, throw a couple of strikes, and then shoot his shot and likely get inside. Now, that's why I really do find this interesting because Bo Nickal is not the kind of guy you go in, throw a couple shots at, change levels, and shoot on because it's just not going to work. There's going to be some insane scrambles in this fight if and when it happens. There's going to be all sorts of posturing between the two men. I think it's going to come down largely to who's a better striker, which is odd.
Yes.
Anytime you have a really high-level skill and somebody else brings that same skill set to the table, they usually X each other out, and then we got to go with plan B for both guys. And in MMA, if grappling's your top priority and your top skill, you move into striking afterwards. So I think both guys are going to look to wrestle at first, kind of to prove some points and maybe posture with each other a little bit just to show who the better wrestler is. Because I think that's sort of what we're looking at with these two. They want to find out who the better fighter is, but on top of that, they want to find out who the better wrestler is.
Right, but most importantly, which one of us could take the other one down.
Right.
Forget who wins the fight. Whoever gets the first takedown in their mind is the winner.
Right, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of prop bet on that, or even a bet between the two men, like let's see who gets the first takedown. And that would make the first round very enticing. But I do think that Bo Nickal, the way he fights with the intensity and the striking that he throws, he usually is very heavy-handed and throws things with all of his energy. He would start to gas, and that's something that we've seen a little bit out of Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat is as game as anybody we've ever seen. When people say, oh, I'm worried about Khamzat's gas tank, I have to wonder about that because Khamzat Chimaev gave it everything he's got and still was standing at the end of 3 rounds with Kamaru Usman, still was standing with Gilbert Burns. So I don't think it's a gas thing. I think it's an efficiency thing. I think he needs to know when to press the gas, and hopefully this fight goes when they're both ready to fight for 5 rounds. I would like to see it happen for a title fight at some point, but if it were to go 3 rounds, I think it would be a cleaner fight and we might see more grappling. But the longer the fight pushes on, I think it becomes more of a striking match. And at this current stage of both their careers, I have Khamzat as the superior striker. I think he's a little bit more durable. I think he's a little bit better at mixing the martial arts right now. But Bo Nickal's one of those guys, and I'm not just saying this to Khamzat Chimaev. I'm saying this to everybody. Get him now before he becomes a real problem.
Yeah.
It's really nice to get somebody under your belt before they become a total evolved fighter or they become a guy that's now in their prime. If you have Bo Nickal in your division and you need to deal with him, you know it's inevitable, go at him now while his confidence isn't that of a world champion, while his confidence isn't 100% and he thinks he has some developing and skill still left to build. Because eventually he's going to be a top dog. Eventually all of the little patches in his boat are going to be filled up and he's going to be a complete mixed martial artist that is a world of trouble to be dealing with on the ground. So that's why I think Khamzat Chimaev and Bo Nickal really do match up well. I'd love to see the fight happen. I think people are going to come back to this video pretty soon and be like, oh man, I'm so glad you guys broke this down, because as soon as it gets announced, everybody's going to be clamoring for content on it. And this is the first place you'll find it. I don't think anybody's broken down the hypothetical match of Nickal versus Chimaev yet. I'm glad we're the first to do it.
Yeah, well, you know, and there is a lot to break down. And I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said it would largely be a striking match, because sometimes you see 2 guys that are superior grapplers that each can kind of negate each other's game.
Right.
And they're only left with just standing and seeing who's the better kickboxer. You know, you see, and while I don't think that would be the entirety of the fight if Nickal were to fight Chimaev, I think it would. I think the first round, maybe even the first 2 rounds, both of them are really going to be shooting for that takedown.
Yeah.
But if they learn after 10 minutes or 5 minutes, hey, look, I can't get this guy down.
Right.
You know, you can't get me down either. And so it's like, okay, I get it. Like, our wrestling's probably on the same level. Rather than expending all of my energy shooting and failing at takedowns, which is not looking good in the judge's eyes, I'm just going to test my luck at striking with you.
Right.
And Bo Nickal has taken really quickly to striking.
Yes,
sometimes you see wrestlers, they just never get it together with the 1s and 2s. They move in a way that it just doesn't mesh with them.
Yeah.
And Justin Gaethje's a perfect example of the opposite of that. You know, Justin Gaethje will not, he refuses to wrestle with you. He only strikes with you, and he's a great striker, and he has really built an arsenal with Trevor Whitman of strikes that allow him to defeat many, many high-level fighters, including high-level strikers like Rafael Fiziev, etc. And Bo Nickal's well on his way to that. Bo Nickal is knocking guys out.
Right.
And yes, they're regional guys. Yes, they're lower-level UFC guys. Yes, they're favorable matchups. But he's putting the combinations together. It's not just one-punch head-hunting sort of shots.
Right.
You see how his brain's working with his shot selection, and you can see from that Bo Nickal's going to be a good striker.
For sure.
Is Bo Nickal ever going to be Alex Pereira? No. Is he ever going to be Sugar Sean O'Malley? No. Is he going to be somebody that you have to worry about on the feet at 185 because he can knock anybody out? Yes, he will.
For sure.
He's on his way to that. Khamzat's already there.
Yeah.
Khamzat's got a great chin. He showed that against Gilbert Burns. He showed that against Kamaru Usman. He's got that come forward, you're not going to stop me. You're not going to stop my attacks sort of fighting style. So he right now, if you were to get in there with Bo, it could be some trouble for Bo on the feet, because Khamzat, if he is able to defend those takedowns like he believes he can, I think he can make Bo pay in the scrambles. He can defend the takedown, and then he's looking for hooks. He's looking for uppercuts, and he's throwing with vicious intentions on every shot.
Right.
And so I think that might be a little bit hard for Bo to handle at this early stage.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, the submission ability of Khamzat. Khamzat's great with, not just beating you up on the ground when he takes you there, but he's really good with his submissions. So is Bo. We've seen Bo win by triangle. We've seen, and a lot of times, you can't always guarantee that with wrestling. Like look at a Colby Covington. He rarely gets a submission, and so his game is totally different. He takes you down and kind of holds you, and it's positional, and he wins most of his fights by decision. But Bo's not a guy who's looking for decision victories. He's looking for finishes with knockouts or submissions. Khamzat, one thing we know about him is he's always looking for the finish. So this fight to me will get made at some point, and I think it's going to really come down to, and the other thing that, I'll just briefly touch on, Bo Nickal was never considering fighting at welterweight. Bo Nickal's a big fella. And Khamzat Chimaev, started at 170. That was his preferred division, and he's moved up, and he's since filled out the frame. But Bo Nickal, still being in his late 20s, is probably going to get even bigger.
For sure.
And so there could be a size and strength advantage in the favor of Bo Nickal as the years go by. So lots of stuff to consider. I hope they make this fight at some point. I hope, like you said, it's for the title, because Nickal versus Chimaev for the undisputed 185 belt, whoever held the belt and whoever was the challenger, doesn't really matter. That would be an incredible fight.
Yeah, we might end up seeing a great trilogy or even just a rematch between these two if they put on an epic fight and it is for the title. And I would have to say that the 185 division is in good hands. I think the future is for sure going to go to Bo Nickal and Khamzat Chimaev and a few other guys that are going to make their way in. But those are the two guys leading the charge at all of the guys that have been there, the staples, Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, all these guys, Jared Cannonier. Those guys have been there for a while. But 5 years from now, we're going to see a whole new class of guys. And I think that the leading two are going to be Khamzat and Bo. And I think Bo Nickal really does feel like he's making crazy leaps and bounds in his improvement. And that's why he's kind of at a deeper understanding than a lot of people, because he's been a competitor for his entire life. He knows, okay, I felt it out a little bit. I'm not fighting the most difficult opposition right now. I'm not currently fighting former world champions, on my rise to the belt like Khamzat Chimaev is, but give me a little bit of time and I will. And I think in 5 fights, we could see a totally different Bo Nickal. We could see a guy who's able to mix the martial arts even cleaner than he can right now. You touched on his boxing. I think that was a great point. He throws great strikes, and like you said, he's not a stiff guy. He doesn't move like a clunky wrestler. He's putting his boxing together, and I love that he didn't try to go become like a Muay Thai expert or something. He's like, I know I got my wrestling in my back pocket. Now I need to figure out what the highest percentage for me to get knockouts or knockdowns is, and that's usually with your hands. The fundamentals will always get your hand raised. If you can go out there and beat somebody with the fundamentals, and then you also have high-level world-class grappling in your back pocket to throw on them at any time, you can take the fight where you want it. You can fight at the pace you want to fight at, and that's really one of the most intriguing parts of this matchup, because Khamzat Chimaev has all of the same things that Bo has. He's such a great grappler who can pull that out at any moment, but we've seen him dig deep. We've seen him put great combinations and land great shots on title challengers, on former world champions, and I think that both of them have a task and a goal in mind when they face off against each other, and that's to prove who the better wrestler is. But I don't think the fight ends when one of them gets the fight to the ground. I think there's going to be some incredible scrambles going on. I think both guys are going to have their moments when the fight's on the ground. But the first one to realize, okay, I need to make this a complete fight. I need to beat him on the feet as well. And let's just abandon some of the grappling and wait for the right time. That's the one that's going to have the advantage. Don't just go out there and try to wrestle, because the chances of submitting Khamzat Chimaev are pretty low. The chances of submitting Bo Nickal are pretty low. You've got to wear him down. You've got to cook him and get him in a spot where he's more vulnerable and less defensive. And that's when you can find your finish on the ground. That's why, for me, I keep going back to the fact that they're wrestling so good it's going to X each other out. They're going to start striking. And while we're not doing a prediction right now, as it sits right now, I've got to go Khamzat Chimaev on this one. His striking is very good. He's fought tougher opposition. He has more self-confidence in himself and has proven to us time and time again why he belongs not only at the top of the UFC, but he pretty much belongs in a title fight, or else you're putting up a serious mismatch on a card, because he's just too talented. Bo Nickal, on the other hand, He's looked pretty much flawless, but his opposition's not near as high level as what Khamzat Chimaev's faced already. And I think the self-confidence is something that really has to play into effect, because with Bo saying he needs 5 fights minimum before he gets a title shot, and Khamzat Chimaev for the past 3 years saying I'm the best in the world and I'm just waiting for my title opportunity, that's going to be a big thing in this fight. I'd love to see this fight happen sooner than later, but something tells me we're going to need to wait about another 18 to 24 months before we actually see this thing come to life.
Yeah, I'm like you. I would pick Khamzat Chimaev if the fight were to happen today, but come back a calendar year from now, in my opinion, could very well be different.
Beginner gains are a real thing.
Yes, sir.